Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Fab Giovanetti, and we're going to be talking about her book, The Customer-Driven Marketing Handbook, Building Marketing Plans That Capture and Convert, from Kogan Page. So, Fab, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before we start, where can people find you?
You can find me pretty much everywhere online at my name. So that might be the easiest thing. Is Fab Giovanetti, which is FabGiovanetti.com for my website, or on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all the good places is the same. Fab Giovanetti.
Excellent. So, really enjoyed the book, Fab. What was the inspiration behind the book?
So I run a school, so I want to mention that for context, called Alt Marketing School, like alternative. And so my students were the inspiration for this book. Having worked with them over the past 5 years, I've been worked with over thousands of different people, especially new marketers and marketers that don't have a traditional training background, so to speak, and academic especially, I should say. I wanted to give them something that encapsulated what we teach, which I believe is the foundations of great marketing, not just marketing. So actually looking at the customer first, looking at building trust, relationship, community, and be able to give it to more people, obviously still to our students, but being able to give a sprinkle of what we are about. Because I believe that making marketing better for marketers will make marketing better for everybody else.
Okay. You often talk about marketing to hearts, not brains. How does a customer-driven plan actually differ from the traditional data-heavy plans most of us were taught in marketing school?
I think data still matters, and actually, I talk a lot about being creative and more creative marketers. I think there's some of us are more analytical than others, and they might actually struggle with bringing things back to data and validation and knowing what works, right? So I still find that data matters, and I talk a lot about it actually in the book too.
We were
However,
talking about it even before we went live. The first thing you went to was talking about data because we were talking about your book.
exactly, right? So understanding numbers matters and matters so much, but I always look at numbers through the lenses of what it tells me about my customers and how can I consistently, I should say, I'm thinking about the best word here, consistently go back to them to get information, to get validation, or even to dispute some of the things that I think. So whether there are just new audiences or there are customers or there are lapsed customers or clients, it doesn't matter. Building feedback and a two-way conversation matters, but it's really hard, right? So you need to be conscious about it and you need to build it across the different stages of the journey more than I think we are traditionally thought to do.
In the book, you discuss building a sense of belonging. In a world obsessed with reach and impressions, how can a small brand actually measure whether their customers feel like they belong?
I think these days there's so many ways that we can, as long as we capture the words of our customers, as long as we capture some of their sentiment, which I'll get to in a second, you can use bigger tools. So there are many ways, right? Bigger tools for sentiment analysis, especially on social, but we're thinking about smaller brands. So a lot of the time, it's more of that manual input or gathering of how people feel. So actually, which benefits in many ways, right? Whether it's testimonials, whether it's referrals, whether it's just social proof in general. Once you capture that, you are able to better understand and measure how they feel about your brand, where are the gaps, and also their commitment and relationship. As well as that, you do have then the hard numbers churn, aka retention, aka how many people commit to come back or not. There are so many things that we can do, but I think what really speaks to me and what I get excited about is when I get the real people telling me exactly what they love or what they don't. I prefer actually when they tell me what they don't because we tend to
Yeah.
be more vocal when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And I can do something about it if they do. So even as a small brand, it can be as simple as building a habit to ask questions and not being afraid to hear crickets for a very long time
Yeah.
sometimes. Right? That I think are some of the first thoughts that came to mind.
Okay, good. You mentioned that loyalty is often misunderstood. What is the biggest mistake brands make when trying to build customer advocacy?
For me, so advocacy and loyalty obviously go hand in hand. I think loyalty can be misunderstood because a lot of the time it becomes like a smaller part of a funnel, right? Because if you look at it as a funnel, but I find that when you build really strong loyalty and through that also advocacy, what is the difference? Loyalty is passive commitment in a way, I would say, because to me, advocacy is when you're actively talking about the brands you love. So there's a bit of a switch and a bit of a jump there. But both of them are very undertapped a lot of the time. And I find that if you understand that they actually have the power of bringing more people into your world, helping you with the top of your funnel, which we know, just in case as a reminder, is that brand awareness bit. If our people can help bring more people into that brand awareness without us having to do anything about it, that obviously is very beneficial. This is why it's misunderstood. Some of the things that we can do that is first and foremost, sounds very basic, but I always like to go back to what we have. What are you currently doing to actually surprise and delight? I was thinking about what words to use. I talk about a lot in the book, by the way. To surprise and delight your current customer audiences.
Yeah.
The super fans to me are an audience that is more a community, because they might not be customers. They can, but they're not potentially sometimes. Those super fans and those customers, how are you surprising and delighting them? What are you doing to show them that you also value what they're giving you, whether it's their time, their money, whatever it is? A lot of the time we focus so much on acquisition, then we forget about, first of all, understanding how we can get people to be seen. And then from that, give them the smallest minimal action they can take to talk about you or share their experience with you. So I think there's two pieces here. First of all, what are you currently doing before we even give them more stuff to do? What are you doing to actually reward them? And like, well, I'm giving them something, a product or a service. I know, but we want to be seen. We want to connect. So what are we doing to surprise and delight? And then after that, how can you give the minimum, the smallest, tiniest, simplest, lowest lift action for them to take to talk about you? What would that look like for you?
You talk a lot. I know you talk a lot in the book about customers, and um, um, you designed a flexible framework in the handbook. If a marketer feels overwhelmed by a plan that isn't working, what is the first lever they should pull to pivot without starting from scratch?
There's two things. Sorry. First thing is probably simplify. Take something out, and I know it's going to be hard. And for some of us, you have other decision makers and stakeholders. Just for context, I worked in house, I worked in agencies, I was a head of an agency, head of marketing for an agency. I had my own agency. I've pretty much wore every single hat aside from corporate. So just that in mind. But startups, I've done it all. And I know that sometimes we have to, because our students sometimes work in corporate, talk to a manager, talk to somebody else, and they're the decision makers. So I know it's not always easy. So I'm going to give you a little caveat here. But simplifying is the first thing. What can you take away? What can you hit pause on so that you can focus on what actually is moving the needle? So that is the first thing. Now, caveat to that, if we're struggling because we have to bring it to somebody else and it's not just us making the decisions, don't bring it as this is what we're going to do, but bring it as I found that this is not working. These are some of my solutions that I recommend. By doing this, then we can focus more on that. By doing this, we can grow more of that. So instead of saying, I don't want to post on TikTok anymore for the next 6 months because we need to focus on something else, by hitting pause on TikTok, we can actually focus more on Instagram, where our audience is most engaged. This is very basic. I would build a stronger case. But just to give you an idea, always provide a solution when you're coming with a problem instead of expecting other people necessarily to find a solution. Then they can make the decision. After that, simplify. After that, also build a culture of experiments. I talk about experiments in a whole chapter of the book. I love experiments. And that means I find that is a very powerful thing because it allows us to be really structured about trying new things instead of just going off a whim or getting lots of ideas and then having to action them all. If we look at trying something new or changing or pivoting as an experiment, we are more structured in the way that we give ourselves a goal, we give ourselves a time frame, we give ourselves permission. You talked about overwhelmed. I think burnt out is one of the biggest issues that we want to actually tackle at the school as well. Burnt out and overwhelmed means that you cannot add more. And I find that within marketing, especially in the world of AI and automation that allows us to do more, we are the first ones that get stuff back in our plate all the time, right? So experiments to me are huge. They're controlled, they're time bound, and they allow you to try something new, but be very conscious about what you do.
With the rise of AI and data privacy concerns, how do we personalize marketing enough to capture and convert without feeling intrusive or creepy?
Uh, it actually starts with 3 steps back from that, from even doing anything. And it starts with literacy. Once you are able to build enough literacy around the, again, this is where you should know obviously what you're doing this for, how, what personalization are you building, what brand for, what do you know about the brand, is it yours, where do you sit within it, right? So you need to understand obviously where you're using it. But once you have that context, which hopefully you have, it's first about the literacy. If you don't even know where to start because you don't have the knowledge, then inevitably at some point you're just going to rely on what other people are saying or what a platform or a tool is saying without fully understanding the implications of it. So it's a bit of a cop out answer, I know, but because it's not as sexy, because I'm telling you, just go and do your research and you're like, thanks. But I would rather you do that, because I think that then with that privacy policy can come, what is it? Compliance and crisis management. There's also that, to be honest, in AI these days. Policies, documents, and anything checklists. All of these things can come and they can be helpful just to have an understanding. Transparency makes sense. But when I say the word transparency, what does it mean to you? What it means to you, it might not be what it means to me, and how we process the data and how we use the context that we have from our students, right? So if you don't unknowingly, and I'm sorry because you're a marketer and you're like, why do I always have to be the person that does the homework? I know. But if you can do that homework and actually get a better understanding of the power of the AI that you want to use, right? Whether it's a tool, a platform, or a whole structure, or a model, even obviously, then you'll be able to make better decisions. But if you don't, when something breaks, you don't know why it breaks. And that is a really stressful position to be in. So it's always starting basically a couple of steps back and starting small that way.
Excellent. You highlight brands like Gymshark and Notion in the book. What is the one specific customer-driven move one of these giants made that a solo entrepreneur or small business can replicate with zero budget?
First of all, it's kind of funny when I think about the main examples that I use is because are actually brands that I use myself. We try to always cast a wider net about kind of great examples, and our students bring us some that maybe I wouldn't have found myself. But I found there's always, I use Notion every day, so I might come up with Notion actually because to me that's the what they do is actually to me very founder solopreneur driven. Is that building in public element that they do a lot of the time, is that requesting for feedback, the feedback loops they build, they're really strong. And to me is actually something that I've seen them very well almost before them or the time they started by individuals. So it's kind of like an individual strategy, if you want to call it, that then I saw they replicated very well as an actual software platform, which I think is great. And it's really about um again, appreciating the crickets sometimes, but still be open to ask the questions. What would you like to see next? How can we make this better? And a lot of the time, if you're struggling with people responding, I have this little trick, which is in our Slack with our students. I literally just ask people to use an emoji, like to make like a decision, like multiple choices. And that can work really well with polls on LinkedIn. It can work even with emojis somewhere else. I told you before the lowest lift. I still live by that. But just if you find that you don't have maybe the relationship just yet with your audience to get lots of people responding quite openly, find a way for them to tell you what they're looking for. And then the trick here, which I talk about in the book more in depth, is not only to implement it, that's a feedback loop, but then also to announce it. And they do it even better by bringing back the initial conversation, especially if somebody commented on something, and break it down what they did and the change. A lot of the time we do something new and then we never shout about it. They do this really well. And again, it's very much based on examples of great entrepreneurs that I've seen doing that. And it's kind of funny how they kind of match almost in a way.
We're in 2026 and AI is everywhere. How does your relationship first framework protect a brand from becoming just another generic AI generated voice in a crowded market?
It's the relationship first element, literally. Because when you are building relationships first, a human has to come in to build that relationship, whether we like it or not. Because then, to me, if I ask you, especially with the super fans, especially with the loyal customers, even if it means a relationship at scale, which you're going to talk more about in the book with examples, but you still have a human making some of the decisions, and you still have a human bringing some of that in, which means the human will be able to find the best, even if it's copy, the best copy that really speaks to you because it uses the customer's voice. He will be able to identify the topics that actually our audience want to know about. I'm thinking about the school as well now, or your customers are really having issues and questions around. I've had, just for context, I had a whole month of AI training for our students. So we had AI experts for the whole month of April at the time of recording. And it was really fascinating because every single time they came and they shared something, obviously, they always said that bringing your uniqueness out and how you want to be remembered and how your customers perceive you, it's one of the big things that kind of brings the human back in. And every single time they talked about processes and systems from an AI perspective, they were always like, we want to sandwich it with the human at the very beginning and at the very end, always. And I think that really reminds you that if you're not conscious about where does the human touch come back in my processes and systems and the way that I use other things to help me out, then you are going to sound like everybody else because, or I should say everybody else that just uses AI without bringing themselves back in.
Yeah.
It's almost the fact that the final thing I want to say, just because I'm very not conscious, I'm very I thought about the word now. I'm very feel very strongly, let's say this, about time and what it is. We now have more time because these tools allow us to have more time to do things. But because of how time works as a construct, we fill time then with other things. So instead of reclaiming it for space, for thinking, for making better decisions, for asking questions, for taking a goddamn break, we fill with more because we can do more. So we add more instead of taking out, right? So I think it's that reminder that we need to be conscious about that and actually reclaiming that time to get the help that we need where we can save some time and effort so that we can bring the human back in. That to me is magical.
You've spoken about the importance of private communities and dark social. How does a marketing plan account for the conversations happening where brands can't see them?
That's a really, really interesting question. And it really does depend. And what makes me smile is that we actually talked to a couple of our coaches and some of the experts that we've had in the last couple of months as well about this, because the dark social has become something that it's more prominent now in 2026, and I'm sure it's going to only continue. And I think one of the things that a lot of community owners and community builders say is that there is so many ways, talking about the sentiment that I mentioned at the beginning and how people feel about you and the results that they're getting. There's so many other ways that we can quantify impact, but we have to be open to use still some traditional metrics where needed, but also remember that if marketing is really relationship building so that we can direct people to the right solution, which hopefully is us, some of this is not going to be driven by impressions, but it's going to be driven by the people. And some of the best brands that I've seen out there, they've combined KPIs and metrics, so measurements that are more traditional with their own way of measuring success. So when it comes to something like dark social, you might have to identify ways that fit within what success means to you. That might be measurements that are, I'm going to say made up, which sounds a bit like airy fairy, but they might be made up because they represent what you want to see. More conversations, better conversations, more collaborations, people showing up to, for example, networking events. If they double and they triple, that means that they're actually engaging with each other. And then from that, you can use the traditional metrics to see how it impacts everything else around your brand. But sometimes you got to get creative. And again, we're marketing rebels, so I always go a bit left field where I can. And I think this is a great chance to do that and just be bold.
Fab, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your new book,
Pleasure.
The Customer-Driven Marketing Handbook, Building Marketing Plans that Capture and Convert. So if I wanted to buy a copy of this, where could I get one from?
You can go to the Cook and Pages website and you can definitely grab it from there. That's the best place. And you can write down in any other good virtual and offline bookshelf the longest name in the world for a book, and you will find it.
And where can we find more information about you?
So fabgiovanetti.com or alt, like alternativemarketingschool.com is our school. So go and find us there if you want to, we keep up with marketing so you don't have to. So if you want a bit of help with that, we're there for you.
Excellent. Fab, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your book and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.